I never thought I'd see the day when I would lose my grip on the things that mattered most. My name is Sophia, and I once prided myself on being the strong, reliable matriarch of our family. My life was built around my husband, Robert, and our son, Ethan. But after Robert passed away, everything began to unravel in ways I never could have imagined. It was a cold autumn morning when everything changed. The leaves had already turned, the bright oranges and reds that danced through the trees now piled up in the corners of the garden. The air was sharp, a reminder that the seasons were changing, and soon winter would be here to stay. I woke up early, as I usually did, the house quiet except for the creaking of the wooden floors beneath my feet. It was a familiar stillness, but now it was different. It felt hollow, as if the house itself had lost its warmth. My morning routine had always been my anchor in a world that felt unpredictable, but lately, even that had started to feel unfamiliar. I made my coffee, just the way Robert used to, black with a hint of cinnamon. But somehow, without him, it tasted empty. The silence of the kitchen was suffocating, and I could almost hear his voice in my head, joking about how I'd never make coffee the way he liked it. Robert had been gone for 5 years now. At first, I was a wreck. The house felt like a shell, and every corner held his memory. Every room an echo of a laughter long gone. But as time passed, I learned how to keep going, to find purpose again. Throwing myself into the family business what was left of it. Our printing company, Robert's pride and joy, had been a joint venture. We built it together from the ground up. It was our legacy, and for all the pain of losing Robert, it was what kept me moving forward. But no matter how busy I stayed, I couldn't escape the hollow ache of missing him. On that particular morning, after my coffee was made, I sat by the window, as I often did, watching the garden outside. The sunlight was soft, painting fanciful patterns on the walls. It was the kind of moment that made you pause, think, remember. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I hadn't heard from Ethan in days. He used to call me at least once a week, but now it was rare. When he did call, the conversations felt strained, more out of obligation than genuine connection. Ethan had always been my pride and joy, but lately, I had a sense that something was slipping between us. I could see his face in my mind, his strong jawline, the way his dark hair fell into his eyes when he was tired, his sharp wit that always kept me on my toes. Ethan was everything Robert and I had hoped for, and yet something had changed. After Robert passed, Ethan became distant. I thought it was just grief. I thought we were both mourning the loss of the man we loved. But over the years, I began to see it for what it truly was. Ethan had grown into someone I didn't fully understand. It wasn't just his absence that bothered me. It was the way he spoke about things. He had a tone now, a sharpness to his words that never used to be there. He was all business, all focus. When we spoke, I could sense that his mind was always elsewhere, usually on his career or on his wife, Lara. Ethan's world seemed to be growing smaller, and I was no longer a part of it. Still, I tried to remain patient. I told myself that he was just busy. He had a lot on his plate, after all. And Lara, his wife, oh Lara. I tried so hard to like her. She was beautiful, poised, and always so composed. But there was something about her that made me uneasy. I couldn't place it at first. She never seemed to make an effort to get to know me, to understand who I was. It was as though she was always evaluating me, sizing me up, measuring how much I could give her. And every time I saw her, it was like she was keeping some part of herself hidden, like there was a secret that she wasn't ready to share with me. It had been 3 years since they got married, and I thought maybe things would change. But they hadn't. Their visits had become less frequent, and when they did come, The air between us was thick with unspoken tension. It was always Lara's idea to leave early, to go back home, as though they couldn't wait to be rid of me. And yet, when Ethan was home alone, things seemed different, more familiar, more like they used to be. But those moments were rare, fleeting. The worst part was that when Ethan did come to visit, he seemed distant, distracted, as if his mind was somewhere else. Sometimes I caught him glancing at his phone or checking his watch, eager to leave, eager to move on to something else. It wasn't like it used to be. I remembered when he was younger, when he would sit with me and talk about his dreams, about the future. Now, there was no future in our conversations. It was all about the present, his job, his plans, the things that didn't involve me. I couldn't remember the last time we had a real conversation. But that morning, as I sat in the quiet of the house, something changed. I suddenly felt a deep, gnawing sense of unease. It wasn't just the silence. It was the weight of something unseen, something lurking in the background that I couldn't quite grasp. And then, as if in response to my thoughts, I realized it. The will. It wasn't just that I had misplaced it. I had lost it. Somewhere in all the piles of papers, the old family records, the business documents, the will was gone. The last thing I wanted was to think about such things. After all, Robert had made everything so clear. His wishes had always been simple. The house, the business, the savings, everything was meant to go to Ethan. He had made it easy for me to avoid complications after his passing. But now, that document, that single piece of paper that held everything together, was gone. I hadn't seen it in months, and now I couldn't remember the last time I had touched it. The panic set in slowly, like a creeping shadow. I could feel my hands tremble as I clutched my cup of coffee, trying to steady myself. I thought I was prepared for this, prepared for life without Robert. I had kept everything running smoothly for years, made sure Ethan had everything he needed, even when he didn't ask for it. But now it was different. If I didn't find the will, if I couldn't prove what Robert had wanted, everything would be at risk. The business, our family home, everything I had worked so hard to protect, it could all slip through my fingers. I had to find it. But where could it be? As I sat there, trying to calm my racing thoughts, I heard a noise from the hallway. A soft knock at the door. It was Ethan. He had come over earlier than I expected. He had his usual half smile on his face, but something about it seemed off, like he was hiding something. I forced myself to stand up and greet him, but in my heart, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. "Mum, we need to talk," he said, his voice low, like he had something important to say. Something I wasn't going to like. I smiled weakly, trying to keep the worry from my face. "Of course, Ethan. What's on your mind?" But even as I asked, I could feel the tension building between us. This was no ordinary conversation. This was the beginning of something I couldn't yet see. Something that was going to shatter everything. I thought I knew about my son, and about myself. The lost will was only the start. What came next would change everything. In the days that followed, the unease I felt began to grow, like a storm cloud slowly gathering overhead. I couldn't shake the conversation I had overheard, the hushed voices of Ethan and Lara, whispering about their plans that didn't include me. At first, I tried to convince myself that I was just being paranoid, that maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But every time I saw Ethan or Lara, the same cold, calculating tone echoed in my thoughts. And the more I looked at them, the more I began to see the cracks in the facade they had so carefully built. Ethan had always been a good son, or at least that's how I had always seen him. As a boy, he was full of life, eager to help, quick to laugh. Robert and I worked hard to give him everything we could. We put him through the best schools, gave him the freedom to pursue his passions. But after Robert passed away, Ethan seemed to change. There was a distance that grew between us, an invisible wall I couldn't climb over no matter how hard I tried. It wasn't just his absence that bothered me, but the way he acted when he was around. He was always in a rush, constantly, checking his phone or looking at the clock, as if he had somewhere else to be. It wasn't like before, when we would sit together and talk for hours. Now, when we spoke, it was surface level, about the weather or his job, never about us. At first, I told myself it was just grief. I thought that, perhaps he was still mourning his father. It was understandable. I, too, had days when I missed Robert so deeply that I could barely breathe. But as time went on, I started to wonder if something else was going on, something I didn't fully understand. The days passed, and every time I tried to reach out to Ethan, I felt a sense of distance between us. He became more and more focused on his work, his future, and less on the family that had once meant everything to him. I tried to be patient, understanding that he was building his life with Lara, and that meant I had to take a step back. But there was always something in the back of my mind, some nagging feeling that I couldn't shake off. Was I losing my son? And if so, why? Then came the first hint that something was terribly wrong. It was a Thursday morning when I received a phone call from Ethan. He sounded distant, distracted, like he was speaking to me through a fog. "Mum," he said, his voice flat. "We need to talk about the house, about the business." I had been expecting this conversation. I knew it was coming eventually, after Robert passed. But something in Ethan's tone told me that this wasn't just a conversation about logistics. It was about something deeper. The underlying message was clear. He wanted more than I was willing to give. "I don't think you've been paying enough attention to the business lately," Ethan continued. "The market's changing, and the company needs to adapt if it's going to survive." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Ethan, I've been handling things. I've kept the company running just fine without you. You know that." I could hear him sigh on the other end. "Mom, I know you've done your best, but it's not enough. You're not getting any younger, and I'm not going to wait forever to take over." His words hit me like a slap. Take over? I had built this company from nothing with Robert, and now Ethan was talking about taking it over. I could hear Lara's influence in his words, like she was feeding him these ideas, pushing him towards something I wasn't ready for. "What are you saying, Ethan?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to remain calm. "I'm just saying, it might be time to start thinking about the future," he replied, almost as if he was speaking to me like a business associate rather than a mother. "If you're not able to run things anymore, maybe it's time for a change. Maybe we should look at selling the business." Sell the business? The thought of it made my heart race. It wasn't just a company. It was my life's work. It was Robert's legacy. How could he ask me to consider selling it? "I'm not selling anything, Ethan," I said firmly. "That company is mine, and I'm not ready to let go of it. You need to understand that." There was silence on the other end for a long moment, and then, as if he had already made up his mind, Ethan spoke again. "Okay, Mom. I just want you to think about it. Let's not drag this out too long. We'll talk more later." The call ended abruptly, and I was left staring at the phone in disbelief. My own son had just suggested I sell the very thing that had been our family's foundation. The business wasn't just a means of income, it was a reflection of everything Robert and I had worked for. It was a part of our identity, of our history. But Ethan didn't seem to care. All he saw was the dollar signs, the opportunity to climb higher, to take what was rightfully mine. That night I barely slept. I kept going over every word of the conversation, trying to figure out where things had gone wrong. Was it my fault? Had I been too busy, too wrapped up in the business to notice that Ethan was slipping away from me? And what about Lara? I couldn't shake the feeling that she had something to do with this, her cold, calculating eyes always. Watching, always waiting. The more I thought about it, the more I began to feel a sense of betrayal. I wasn't just losing my son. I was losing everything Robert and I had built together. Ethan, once my pride and joy, was now so absorbed in his ambition that he couldn't see the damage he was causing. Or maybe, deep down, he didn't care. The next few days were a blur. I tried to bury myself in work, focusing on the business, on the employees who depended on me. But no matter how hard I tried to push aside the growing sense of dread, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was wrong. I couldn't ignore the signs. I couldn't ignore the way Ethan and Lara were drifting farther away from me, while they pulled themselves closer to whatever it was they were planning. Then came the next blow. It was a Friday evening when I overheard them again. I had just returned home after a long day at the office, and as I entered the living room, I heard the low murmur of voices coming from the hallway. My heart stopped. Ethan and Lara were in the kitchen, standing close together, their heads bent in conversation. At first, I thought about walking away, not wanting to intrude. But something compelled me to stay, to listen. And what I heard made my blood run cold. "She doesn't get it, Lara," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's not going to live forever. If she doesn't hand over control of the business soon, we'll lose everything. And I won't let that happen." I froze in place, my breath caught in my chest. Ethan, my son, was talking about me as though I were a stranger, an obstacle standing in his way. The words echoed in my mind, over and over. If she doesn't hand over control, she's too stubborn to see it, Lara replied, her voice as cold and calculated as ever. "We need to be ready. The moment she cracks, we move in." The conversation sent a chill through me. The moment she cracks, they were talking about me, but not like I was their mother. No, I was just a means to an end, an obstacle to overcome. They wanted control. They wanted everything that was mine, everything I had worked for, everything Robert had left behind. Suddenly, everything made sense, the distance, the coldness, the unspoken tension that had built between us. Ethan wasn't just focused on the business. He wanted to be in control of it, to take it all for himself. And Lara, well, I had always suspected she had an agenda. Now I knew for sure. I stepped back quietly, my heart heavy with the weight of the truth. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was betrayal, plain and simple, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. But what was I supposed to do now? How could I confront them without losing everything? The storm was coming, and I could feel it in my bones. There was no going back. The family I had once trusted, the family I had worked so hard to build, was slipping away from me. And in their place was a cold, calculated greed that threatened to destroy everything. The following weeks dragged by like an endless, suffocating fog. Every interaction with Ethan and Lara felt like a carefully orchestrated performance. They greeted me with smiles that never quite reached their eyes, their words polite but distant, as if they were simply going through the motions. I could see right through them now. The thin veneer of civility couldn't hide the true nature of their intentions. They were plotting something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. But one thing was clear. They were playing a dangerous game. They had no intention of stopping until they had what they wanted. Despite the coldness I felt from them, I continued my daily routine, putting on the appearance of normalcy. I kept myself busy with the family business, though I found it harder and harder to focus. Every time I sat down at my desk, Every time I reviewed a contract or met with a client, all I could think about was what I had overheard. The whispers. In the kitchen, the words they used about me. She doesn't get it. We need to move in when she cracks. I couldn't shake the sense that everything was unraveling, piece by piece. And then, one fateful evening, I decided it was time to confront them. No more games, no more pretending that things were okay. I had to face the truth head on, even if it meant tearing apart what was left of our family. It was a Tuesday evening, and the sky was a muted grey, with a chill in the air that felt like a prelude to the storm that was about to come. I had invited Ethan and Lara over for dinner, an attempt to mend the widening rift between us. But deep down, I knew this wouldn't be a casual dinner. I knew it was time to draw the line in the sand. As I prepared the meal, I couldn't help but think back to all the times I had tried to make things right. I had cooked their favorite dishes. I had asked about their lives. I had offered them my support in every way I knew how. But each time I was met with indifference, with an undertone of something darker beneath the surface. When they arrived, as usual, they walked through the door like it was any other day. Ethan smiled faintly, Lara's lips curled into the same tight smile she always wore. It wasn't the warm embrace I had hoped for, but I swallowed my disappointment and ushered them into the dining room. Dinner was a quiet affair. Ethan and Lara talked about work, their recent travels, the new restaurant they had discovered in the city. The conversation was so empty, so hollow, that I could hardly stand it. But I held my tongue, pretending to be interested, pretending that everything was fine. After the main course, when the dishes had been cleared away and the awkward silence had settled between us, I decided it was time. I had to confront them. No more dancing around the issue. No more pretending that everything was normal. Ethan, I said, my voice steady but strained. Lara, we need to talk. They both looked at me with those same practiced expressions, as if they had been waiting for this moment. Ethan shifted in his seat, glancing at Lara, but neither of them spoke. Lara's gaze flickered to me, sharp and cold, but she remained silent. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. I know what you've been planning. I overheard you both talking. I know what you want. There was a moment of silence, a brief flicker of hesitation in their eyes, before Ethan finally spoke, his voice low, defensive. Mum, I don't know what you're talking about, he said, though I could see the flicker of guilt in his eyes. I didn't let him off the hook. I leaned forward, looking straight at him. Don't lie to me, Ethan. I heard you and Lara talking about the business, about me. You think I'm not paying attention, but I am. You think I don't see what's happening, but I do. Lara's expression hardened, but she didn't speak. She just sat there, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes cold and calculating. You're worried that I won't give you control of the business, I continued, my voice shaking but firm. You're worried that I'll outlive you, that I'll keep everything for myself. But that's not what this is about. This isn't about control, Ethan. This is about family. This is about loyalty. And you've lost both of those. Ethan's face darkened. Mom, you don't understand, he said, his voice growing sharper. You're not getting any younger. You've been running this company for years, but the world is changing. If we're going to survive, if we're going to have a future, we need to think about the next generation. I'm not trying to take something from you. I'm trying to help you. You need to let go. Let go? I repeated, incredulity in my voice. I've spent my entire life building this company, this family. You think I should just let go because you say so? You think this is all yours to take? Lara finally spoke, her voice smooth and calculated, like she had been waiting for her turn. Sophia, we're not trying to take anything from you. she said, her words dripping with false sweetness. We're just trying to make sure that everything is in order. You've had your time. It's time for the next generation to take over. The company can't survive in your hands forever. I felt my blood run cold at her words. The company can't survive in your hands forever. It was as if she was speaking of me like I was an old relic, something to be discarded once it had outlived its usefulness. I wanted to lash out, to scream at them, but instead I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of strength I had left. No, I said firmly. This company, this house, this family, they are not yours to take. They belong to me. And if you think I'll just hand everything over because you and Lara want it, you're wrong. Ethan stared at me for a long moment, his face unreadable, before he finally spoke again, his voice strained. Mum, we're just trying to do what's best for everyone. This isn't about us. It's about the future. I stood up abruptly, the weight of the situation settling heavily on my shoulders. I don't know who you are anymore, Ethan. The son I raised would never talk to me like this. The son I raised would never plan behind my back, never conspire with his wife to take what doesn't belong to him. I turned away from him, my hands shaking, and walked toward the window. I couldn't look at them anymore. Not like this. Not when everything I had worked for was slipping through my fingers. The trust I had in my own flesh and blood had been shattered. They weren't the family I once knew. They were something else. Something dark and manipulative. You've made a mistake, I said quietly, the words heavy with finality. You've made a terrible mistake. And when it all falls apart, you'll have no one to blame but yourselves. I didn't wait for their response. I couldn't. I had no strength left to hear their lies, to listen to their excuses. I had made my decision. I would not let them destroy everything Robert and I had built. And I would not let them tear apart our family. The conversation ended there, but the damage had been done. Later that night, as I sat alone in my study, my thoughts racing, I realized something important. It wasn't just about the will. It wasn't just about the business or the house. It was about my dignity, my respect, my love for my family. And I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all my own son and his wife, take that away from me. I knew what I had to do now. The fight was only beginning. The storm had arrived. And this time, I wasn't going to let it destroy me. I was going to fight back for everything that mattered. For the family I had built. For the legacy I had created. And for the love I had always given, no matter how much it hurt.